Have you ever seen someone get judged simply because they looked ordinary? Tonight, you're about to hear a story that flips the script. A simple-looking woman walks into one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city, and by the end of the night, she will own it. What happens in between will surprise you, and it just might change the way you see the world. Before we dive in, I pray that all of us are protected from harm, negativity, and injustice wherever we are. And may this story serve as a reminder that kindness, respect, and integrity will always find their way to the top. If you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story that touches the heart. Now let's begin. The late afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over downtown Chicago as Rachel Carter stepped out of her rideshare, smoothing the front of her navy blue cardigan. In the distance, the Belmont loomed, a sleek, imposing building of glass and steel, framed by marble columns and an understated gold-lettered sign, a place where senators, CEOs, and celebrities wined and dined. Rachel hesitated at the curb for a moment, clutching her worn leather purse a little tighter. She didn't exactly look the part tonight, no designer gown, no glittering jewelry. Just a simple blouse, slacks, and scuffed flats. But that was exactly the point. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, breathing in the cool evening air. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass doors. Calm, resolute, and determined. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to see. Pushing open the heavy door, Rachel was greeted by a symphony of clinking glasses, soft piano music, and the quiet hum of money in the air. The Belmont exuded luxury in every polished surface and meticulously arranged flower centerpiece. At the reception stand, a sharply dressed man with slicked back hair barely glanced up from his reservation book. "Good evening," he said with the precision of someone who had said it 1,000 times that day. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, Carter. Rachel Carter." "Party of one," she answered, offering a polite smile. There was a flicker, almost imperceptible, of judgment in his eyes as he scanned his list. "Ah, Carter," he said, dragging out her name as if weighing it for worth. "Of course. Right this way." He gestured for a young hostess to lead her. The hostess, a petite woman with kind eyes, smiled a little too apologetically and took Rachel past rows of linen-draped tables, past elegantly dressed patrons deep in animated conversation, until they reached a small, cramped table near the kitchen entrance. Rachel caught a whiff of cooking oil every time the swinging door opened behind her. She sat gracefully without complaint, tucking her purse under her chair. She made a note, interesting choice of seating for solo diners. As Rachel unfolded the heavy leather-bound menu, she glanced around the dining room. Everything was immaculate. Glittering chandeliers, waiters gliding effortlessly between tables, sommeliers decanting rare wines with theatrical flair. At the center of it all, she spotted him, Tyler Grant. Silver hair, impeccable suit, dazzling smile. He floated from table to table like a king among subjects, dripping charm on the visibly wealthy, brushing past the more modestly dressed patrons with a cold efficiency. Rachel watched closely as he greeted a table of executives with hearty laughs, slapping one man on the back as if they were old friends. Then his smile would stiffen as he approached a middle-aged couple in jeans, and the warmth disappeared like mist in sunlight. A waiter approached her table at last, his tone perfunctory, almost bored. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Josh. May I start you off with something from the bar?" Rachel smiled warmly, ignoring the chill in his demeanor. "Yes, thank you, Josh. I'll have a glass of your house red." Josh scribbled it down, barely hiding his surprise at her modest request, and disappeared into the sea of white tablecloths. Rachel leaned back slightly, letting the atmosphere seep into her senses. This place was beautiful, she thought, but beauty without heart was just a facade. As she waited, Rachel noticed Tyler glancing in her direction. His eyes skimmed over her outfit, her lack of sparkle, her solitary seat, and dismissed her entirely with a barely concealed smirk. Rachel simply tucked a stray hair behind her ear and smiled to herself. They had no idea who she really was. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The house red arrived moments later, sloshed carelessly into a glass by Josh with barely a nod. Rachel lifted it, savoring the scent. It was good, no excellent. But the service? It left a sour taste she couldn't ignore. As she sipped, she kept her eyes open, her mind quietly recording everything. Across the room, Tyler Grant laughed a little too loudly with a table of women glittering in diamonds. His voice, rich, confident, carried easily across the polished floor. Of course, we always reserve the chef's best work for our very special guests, he said with a wink. Rachel smiled into her glass. Special guests, huh? Josh returned, flipping open a small notepad. Ready to order, ma'am? Rachel nodded. I'd love the chef's tasting menu, please, with wine pairings. Josh's pen froze mid-scribble. His eyes flickered, first to her cardigan, then her scuffed shoes, before quickly composing himself. Very good, ma'am, he said, though his tone held a hint of disbelief. Rachel caught it easily. She didn't let it show. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, offering a sincere smile. I've heard wonderful things about your chef's creativity. I'm excited. Josh gave a tight, polite nod and disappeared again into the sea of black suits and white tablecloths. As the courses began to arrive, each plate a masterpiece of color and delicate construction, Rachel focused not just on the flavors, which were sublime, but on the service surrounding her. She noticed the way servers seemed to orbit around certain tables, refilling water glasses the second they dipped, offering fresh bread before it was even requested. Her glass, meanwhile, sat empty between courses. Twice, Rachel chuckled quietly to herself, swirling the last drop of wine in her glass. If I didn't know better, she mused, I'd think invisible ink spelled out, unimportant, across my forehead tonight. Midway through her third course, a delicate seared sea base with microgreens, Rachel's observations sharpened. The staff wasn't bad. In fact, they were technically skilled. Plates presented from the left, drinks poured from the right, napkins refolded when a guest left the table. But there was a mechanical coldness in their movements. No real joy, no sense of genuine hospitality, the kind of culture that trickles down from the top. Rachel's gaze shifted again to Tyler, now leaning conspiratorially over a new table. A trio of men in tailored suits who clapped him on the back like an old friend. His laugh was louder now, his charm thicker, as if he were auditioning for a role. And yet, when he glanced at her tiny table tucked away by the kitchen doors, his eyes slid off her like she didn't exist. Rachel laid down her fork neatly beside her plate. It wasn't anger she felt, exactly. It was clarity. This wasn't just about bad service. This was about a rot under the glossy surface of the Belmont. A culture that valued appearances over authenticity, profit over people. And Rachel Carter was here to do a whole lot more than eat dinner. The evening crowd had thickened. The Belmont hummed with the low rumble of expensive conversations, clinking glasses, and the soft crescendo of live piano. Rachel pushed aside her finished sea base, and just as she reached for her napkin, a young hostess, the same kind-eyed one from earlier, appeared at her side. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said quietly, almost apologetically. "Would you like me to clear your plate?" Rachel smiled warmly. "Thank you. What's your name?" The girl blinked, a little startled by the simple kindness. "Emily," she said. "Nice to meet you, Emily," Rachel said. "You're doing a great job." Emily blushed slightly, nodded, and whisked away the plate with the delicate grace of someone used to being overlooked. Rachel noted it again. There's heart here, hidden under the pressure. A few moments later, Josh returned with her next wine pairing, a crisp Sauvignon Blanc. As he poured, Rachel caught a flicker of movement from the corner of her eye. Tyler Grant standing at the host stand watching her. She pretended not to notice, swirling her wine slowly, studying the floral notes. But Tyler was already moving toward her, weaving through the tables with an easy, predatory grace. When he reached her, he smiled. A polished, professional smile that didn't touch his calculating eyes. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his tone wrapped in thin politeness. I hope you're enjoying your experience with us tonight. Rachel looked up and returned the smile, her expression open and unreadable. So far, it's been quite the evening. Wonderful, Tyler said, but his glance flickered over her simple outfit again, the way someone might inspect a knockoff purse. We do strive to provide an exceptional experience for all of our guests. There was the slightest emphasis on all, like a waiter slipping a shard of glass into an otherwise smooth plate. Rachel sipped her wine, her smile unwavering. I can see you're very hands-on with the guests. You must be proud of the place. Tyler's chest puffed slightly. We have a very exclusive clientele. Our standards are particular. Rachel tilted her head thoughtfully. I imagine so. And the former owner? I heard Mr. Hayes was quite meticulous about maintaining a certain spirit here. Something shifted in Tyler's face, a tightness around his jaw he couldn't quite hide. Mr. Hayes was traditional, Tyler said carefully. But times change. We adapt. Rachel nodded slowly, as if considering a grand philosophical truth. Change can be good, she said, but sometimes it can lose the heart of what made something great to begin with. Tyler's smile tightened. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone he'd mentally filed under unimportant. If you need anything further, ma'am, he said, voice brittle with politeness, please don't hesitate to ask. Rachel placed her glass back down on the crisp white tablecloth. Thank you, Mr. Grant, she said with the faintest hint of steel in her voice. I'll let you know. As he turned to leave, Rachel caught a brief glimpse of the expression he thought she wouldn't see. A flicker of irritation, disdain, and worst of all, dismissal. She smiled to herself, calm and composed. Let him believe she was nobody. It would make tomorrow all the more satisfying. The later the hour grew, the less careful the staff became. Rachel noticed it immediately. The tension in their shoulders loosened, the careful masks slipping. Fatigue made truth harder to hide. Between her fifth and sixth course, Rachel caught Josh lingering by a service station, rubbing the back of his neck. A chance. She waved him over casually. Josh, she said warmly, this meal has been incredible. Your recommendations have been spot on. Josh blinked, startled by the praise. Then, almost bashfully, he smiled. Thank you, ma'am. We don't always get, detailed feedback. Rachel laughed gently. That's a shame. Good work deserves to be noticed. He straightened a little at that, shoulders relaxing. Emboldened, Rachel leaned in slightly. I'm curious, she said, voice soft. How long have you worked here? Josh hesitated, glancing around as if checking for hidden ears. 3 years, he said finally, lowering his voice. Before it started feeling different. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Different how? Josh shifted on his feet, clearly debating whether to say more. Finally, he shrugged, a small, defeated gesture. Management changed, he said simply. Used to be about hospitality, family. Now, it's about numbers, appearances. Rachel nodded slowly, giving him space to continue without pressuring. We still do the work, Josh added quickly. But some tables matter more than others, you know? She did know. She'd seen it unfold all evening. Before Rachel could ask more, Emily appeared at her side, cheeks flushed. Tyler wants you at table 12, she whispered to Josh. Now. Josh's jaw tightened. Of course he does, he muttered under his breath. He flashed Rachel a quick, apologetic look before hurrying away, leaving her alone once more. Rachel stirred her wine glass absent-mindedly, deep in thought. So Tyler knew exactly what he was doing, cultivating favoritism, bending over backward for power and wealth, while treating everyone else as disposable. As her final course, a decadent chocolate soufflé, arrived, Rachel knew she had seen enough. But she wasn't finished yet, not even close. When the check arrived, Rachel paid without hesitation, leaving a generous tip. Then, before slipping on her jacket, she caught Emily's arm gently. Emily, she said, her voice kind, when your shift ends, Would you mind joining me for a quick coffee across the street? Emily blinked, startled. I guess so. Rachel smiled. No pressure. I just think you have a story worth hearing. And as Rachel stepped into the crisp night air, she knew one thing for sure. The real soul of the Belmont wasn't gone. It was just hidden, beaten down under the weight of arrogance. But she was here now. And soon, the shadows would have nowhere left to hide. The tiny coffee shop across from the Belmont buzzed with the low murmur of late-night students and night shift workers clutching mugs like lifelines. Rachel sat tucked in a corner booth, nursing a simple black coffee, when Emily stepped hesitantly through the door. Rachel waved her over, smiling warmly. "Thank you for coming," Rachel said as Emily slid into the seat across from her, wringing her hands nervously. "I'm not sure how much I can help," Emily said quickly, almost apologetically. Rachel shook her head. "No pressure. I'm just hoping to understand the real Belmont, beyond what the polished floors and white tablecloths show." Emily hesitated, then glanced over her shoulder as if checking for spies, before leaning in. "It wasn't always like this," she said softly. "When Mr. Hayes was still around, the staff loved working there. He knew everyone's name. He used to shake the dishwasher's hand at the end of every night." Rachel's heart tightened slightly. She could picture it. A true leader, humble and human. "And now?" Rachel asked gently. Emily sighed. "Now, it's all about VIPs. Who spends the most? Who looks rich enough to deserve attention? Tyler, he's different." Rachel sipped her coffee slowly, waiting. Emily's voice dropped lower. "There are rumors," she said, "about the wine sales, about money going missing." Rachel's eyes sharpened. "Rumors?" Emily nodded quickly. "Some of the servers. They say Tyler keeps a separate ledger. Cash transactions. Especially for those expensive rare wines. Sometimes bottles that were supposed to be in inventory just disappear." Rachel kept her expression calm, but adrenaline surged through her veins. "There it is. And no one reports it?" she asked. Emily let out a short, bitter laugh. "You don't report Tyler. He's connected. Anyone who questions him, they either quit or they're pushed out." Rachel leaned back, studying the young woman carefully. Emily wasn't just scared. She was worn down, tired of fighting a losing battle. Rachel understood that kind of exhaustion all too well. Before she could respond, the door chimed again. Josh entered, still in his work clothes, looking around until he spotted them. Rachel waved him over, and after a brief hesitation, he joined them at the booth, sliding into the seat beside Emily. "I figured if Emily was here it was safe," Josh said, offering a small smile. Rachel returned it. "I appreciate you both being here. Truly." Josh leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Look, I don't know what your angle is, but if you're really trying to understand what's happening in there, you need to know, Tyler's been bleeding the place dry." Emily nodded grimly, "and making the staff pay for it." They talked for almost an hour, quietly, cautiously, while Rachel listened, absorbing every word. It wasn't just the wine sales. It was fake vendor invoices. It was intimidation. It was a culture of fear and favoritism that poisoned every beautiful plate that came out of the kitchen. By the time Rachel left the coffee shop, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, her mind was set. Tomorrow wasn't just about revealing herself. It was about cleaning house. And it was going to be messy. The next morning, Rachel was already seated at a small table inside a quiet bakery 3 blocks from the Belmont. A steaming cup of coffee in front of her. A slim leather notebook open to a blank page. Her mind was anything but blank. Everything she had learned the night before spun in her head, forming a dark, tangled web. And at the center sat Tyler Grant, arrogant and smug, spinning it tighter with every shady transaction. Rachel tapped her pen thoughtfully against the table. Time to make it real. She pulled out her phone and sent 2 quick texts. One to Josh, one to Emily. "Need to confirm details. Can you meet for a few minutes before your shifts?" Josh answered first. "Of course. I'll bring someone else you should meet." Rachel smiled slightly. "Good. She needed as many honest voices as possible. An hour later, Josh and Emily slipped into the bakery, accompanied by a tall, serious-looking man in a chef's coat. "Rachel, this is Marco," Josh said. "Sous chef. Been there longer than most of us." Marco extended a strong hand, his grip firm. His eyes were wary but curious. "Josh tells me you're interested in saving the place," Marco said gruffly. "If that's true, you have my attention." Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "I don't want to just save it. I want to restore it." Something softened in Marco's expression. He nodded once, a silent agreement. They sat, and over pastries and strong coffee, the three of them detailed everything. The secret wine sales Tyler ran off the books. The ghost invoices to fake vendors. The pressure on staff to push high-cost items only to acceptable clientele. The way honest complaints mysteriously disappeared. Rachel filled page after page in her notebook, her notes tight and meticulous. When they finished, Marco leaned back with a heavy sigh. "You're gonna need proof," he said. "Talking isn't enough. Not with the board." Rachel smiled thinly. "Already working on it." She opened her tote bag and pulled out a slim recorder. "I'd like to document everything. Dates, incidents, witnesses if possible." Josh whistled low. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Rachel said. "Because once the truth comes out, I want there to be no doubt." Emily fidgeted with her coffee sleeve, anxiety flickering across her face. "If Tyler finds out." "He won't," Rachel said, voice steady. "Not until it's too late." For the rest of the morning, they worked quietly, building timelines, recalling names, incidents, even small slips Tyler had made when he thought no one was listening. Every minute sharpened Rachel's focus. This wasn't just about restoring the Belmont's soul. It was about holding arrogance accountable. And when the dust finally settled, Tyler Grant wouldn't just lose his job. He'd lose the very image of untouchable power he had clung to for years. Rachel closed her notebook, her fingers tightening around the leather cover. It was time. Tomorrow she would make her move. The Belmont's private dining room had never felt so tense. It was 8 a.m., and the staff trickled in one by one. Bleary-eyed servers, wary chefs, hostesses clutching coffee cups. A few board members, stern in their tailored suits, took seats at the far end of the polished mahogany table. At the head of the room, standing tall and unshaken, was Rachel Carter. Not in a plain cardigan anymore. Today, she wore a sharply tailored black blazer, her hair pinned neatly back, a subtle gleam of steel in her posture. She was not here to blend in. Tyler Grant paced near the door, shooting furious glances at his watch, his patent leather shoes tapping an impatient rhythm against the marble floor. Finally, when the last chair was filled, Rachel nodded to the assistant manager, who closed the door with a soft click. Rachel took a breath, steady, controlled, and stepped forward. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice clear and strong. The staff exchanged confused looks. Tyler crossed his arms, his mouth curling into a smug smirk. "And you are?" he demanded loudly. Rachel smiled, a slow, patient smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My name," she said, "is Rachel Carter." A pause. Murmurs rippled through the room. "And as of 3 weeks ago," Rachel continued, "I am the new owner of the Belmont." The silence was instantaneous, sharp enough to cut. Tyler's face drained of color, then flushed a dangerous red. "That's impossible," he blurted. "The Belmont is managed by—" "Was," Rachel corrected gently. "The Belmont was managed by your restaurant group. The previous owner, Mr. Hayes, entrusted it directly to me before his passing." She pulled a folder from the briefcase beside her and opened it with a crisp snap, sliding copies of legal documents down the table toward the board members. Purchase agreements, transfer deeds, authorization letters. Undeniable. Tyler stared, frozen, as the board members thumbed through the papers, expressions darkening. Rachel gave him a moment, let the weight of realization settle heavy on his shoulders, before she continued. "I visited this restaurant recently," she said, voice measured, almost conversational. As a guest, I watched the operations. I experienced the service firsthand. She turned slightly, addressing the staff directly. And I saw a place built on dreams, now hollowed out by arrogance and greed. Several employees dropped their gaze. Others, like Josh and Emily, sat up straighter, hope flickering in their eyes. Tyler recovered just enough to sneer. So what? You didn't like your table? A few slow refills? That's your crusade. Rachel's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with something colder. Certainty. She stepped closer, her words slicing the air. No, she said. My crusade is about leadership, about protecting the legacy entrusted to me. And you, Mr. Grant, you have systematically betrayed that legacy. She nodded toward the assistant, who stepped forward, handing out another set of papers. Spreadsheets, screenshots, handwritten testimonies. Proof. Proof of skimming cash. Proof of shadow ledgers. Proof of favoritism and manipulation. Tyler's mask shattered. This is a setup, he sputtered. These people, he waved at the staff. They're just bitter, disgruntled. They're nobodies. Rachel's voice dropped, calm and razor-sharp. Funny, she said. You were so quick to dismiss the people who actually make this place what it is. You forgot that real loyalty can't be bought. And real leadership isn't about power. It's about respect. Security, already briefed, moved subtly toward Tyler. You're finished here, Rachel said, her tone final. Effective immediately. Your access has been revoked. And the authorities have been notified regarding your financial activities. Tyler's mouth worked soundlessly for a second, his face pale with fury and fear. He opened it to protest again, but one look at the stern faces of the board members told him it was useless. 2 security guards flanked him, gently but firmly ushering him toward the door. As he passed Rachel, he snarled, low and venomous. You won't last a month. Rachel didn't even blink. She simply smiled, calm, certain. We'll see, she said. The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time that morning, a ripple of relief, almost disbelief, spread through the room. Rachel turned back to the staff, her expression softening. I know this has been a difficult time, she said, voice genuine, but I didn't come here to tear this place apart. I came to rebuild it. She paused, meeting their eyes one by one. And I hope you'll help me. A beat of silence, then a murmur, a shift, and slowly, almost shyly, Emily began to clap. Josh joined in, his hands striking the air like a promise. One by one, the others followed. A growing swell of sound, cautious but genuine, filling the room with something that hadn't lived there in a long time. Hope. Rachel smiled, truly smiled, and for the first time since stepping through the Belmont's doors, she allowed herself to believe this wasn't just the end of something rotten. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. The morning sun spilled gold across the marble floors of the Belmont. It had been 3 weeks since Tyler Grant's dramatic exit, and the restaurant was almost unrecognizable. Not because of any major renovations, but because of something deeper. The atmosphere had changed. Where once tension had clung like smoke in the air, now there was an easy hum of pride and purpose. Laughter drifted up from the kitchen. Servers moved through the dining room with energy instead of exhaustion. The Belmont had found its pulse again. Rachel Carter stood near the grand window overlooking the busy street below, clipboard in hand, watching the final preparations for the soft reopening tonight. Everything was almost ready. Ms. Carter. Rachel turned to find Josh approaching, straightening his new uniform. A crisp, modern black with subtle gold trim. You don't have to call me that, Rachel said, smiling warmly. Rachel is fine. Josh grinned. Hard habit to break. Just wanted to say, thanks for giving us a real shot. Rachel tucked the clipboard under her arm. You earned it, she said. Every single one of you. The past weeks had been grueling. Meetings, staff retraining, new supplier contracts, tearing out the toxic policies Tyler had cemented and replacing them with trust, transparency, and respect. Rachel had personally sat down with every team member, from dishwasher to sommelier, and listened. Truly listened. And in return, they gave her something more valuable than any 5-star review. Their belief. "Big night tonight," Josh said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Fully booked. Even got a few critics coming." Rachel laughed softly. "Good. Let them see what this place was meant to be." Behind her, the new slogan gleamed in gold script along the entry wall. "Excellence, served with heart." It wasn't just a motto. It was a promise. As Rachel made one last round through the dining room, she caught sight of Emily arranging a fresh bouquet at the front. She paused for a second, studying the young woman's focused face. This right here was why she fought. Not for power, not for appearances, but for the people who had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. For every nobody who had been treated like less. She smiled to herself as the first evening guests began to trickle through the doors, greeted with genuine warmth by the new team. In the end, it wasn't the chandeliers or the crystal glassware that made the Belmont exceptional. It was the spirit within its walls. A spirit of dignity, hard work, and welcome. Rachel took a deep breath, letting the rich scent of roasted garlic and fresh herbs wash over her. Tonight wasn't just a reopening. It was a resurrection. And it was only the beginning. The final guests drifted out into the cool night, their laughter echoing softly against the quiet street. Inside the Belmont, the chandeliers still glowed, casting warm pools of light over the empty tables. The clink of silverware being polished, the gentle sweep of brooms. All the quiet rituals that signaled the end of a long, triumphant night. Rachel Carter stood alone near the back of the dining room, one hand resting lightly on a velvet chair. She watched as Josh and Emily finished resetting the final tables, their movements easy and unhurried. In the kitchen, she could hear Marco's deep laugh rumbling over the clatter of pots, a sound that hadn't been heard in that space for far too long. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peace of it settle over her. This was not the kind of victory the world applauded with trophies or magazine covers. It was quieter than that. Heavier, more real. She thought back to that first night, sitting alone at a bad table near the kitchen doors, enduring the cold sneers, feeling the weight of invisibility pressing against her. How easy it would have been to walk away. How tempting to leave the place to rot under the hands of the arrogant. But something inside her refused, because some battles weren't about pride. They were about principle. About proving, even if only to herself, that dignity mattered, that respect mattered, and that sometimes the simplest people carried the strongest fire. Rachel opened her eyes and smiled, feeling the deep, steady pulse of life in the restaurant walls, life she had helped restore. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new demands, new dreams. But tonight belonged to every invisible soul who had ever been told they weren't enough. Rachel picked up her jacket, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she crossed the empty dining room. At the door, she paused, glancing back one last time. The Belmont was alive again, and so was she.